And the whole ethos, the whole experience of a skater is, let me just play around with the world around me without any assumptions. And I think that's the key thing. It's like this minimizing any assumptions you have about how something is supposed to be used, and then going out there and actually using it in a way that you could imagine using it. Figure out what community you want to improve or what community you want to be a part of, become an active member in that community, and then eventually you can create your own community based on your own values, based on how you want the world to be. So I think that's the key thing is like, that was the whole idea of the Skatify, was like being immersed in the skateboard community. Now as someone who's, I'm pretty much in the community space, I'd say I'm in the actual, like, you know, most meta community space of like, how do people create communities?
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Mpamuntu, and our goal and mission with this show is to introduce you to stories of young people across the globe who we believe are the next generation of thought leaders in their respective fields, right? As you guys always know, that we are always looking for young, active movers and shakers who will help our community learn, grow, and inspire us. And I believe that today's guest is going to do exactly just that. David Kobrosky, who is the co-founder of a non-profit called Skatify, which works with local organizations across many African countries and the continent in general to build skate parks, donate boards, and engage underprivileged youth in purposeful activities. Over the course of his entrepreneurial journey, David has reached a total of 1,600 teenagers across the US during the course of his fundraising events, and has led a team of more than 90 volunteers cumulatively through his body of work and his team at Skatify. That being said, talk about young, active change makers on the continent. Think of David Kobrosky and his team at Skatify. Without any further ado, David, welcome to the Leaders Podcast.
Thank you so much. Wow, I love this energy here. This is such a perfect day to start off the day. There we go. Love to dive into it. Oh yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. It is indeed a pleasure to have you here, David. It's interesting how you actually landed up here. I don't know if you know a young lady by the name of Amonge, who's from South Africa. She was also on the Global Teen Leaders from the We Are Family Foundation. So I came across your profile through her. And I was like, this guy really looks like a vibe. We should have on the podcast.
I love it. Amonge is awesome. Yes, of course. Wow. There we go. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you. Now, before we even delve into your work, over this past week, I just generally take some time to just really get to know the guest through their social media, through what various published articles, or even I saw you did a TED Talk, which we'll talk about later on. But one thing that really stood out while looking through your social media is that I came across this video in which you took a 3-month-long road trip while taking a 9-to-5. That blew me away. And I was like, well, man, I wanted you to really talk to me about that. What inspired it and how was the experience?
Wow. Yeah. That was one of the best moments, or best, I guess, 3-month periods of my life.
Yeah.
What I've realized is pretty early into quarantine that, everything's remote anyways. Everyone, we're operating this way. So why not just build, if everything's remote, then you can be anywhere you want. So why not just make a whole trip out of it, right? That way I figured, I was from Boston. I was staying home with the family for a lot of quarantine and a lot of the early days of COVID. And then I realized, but why not, pick up shop and do around the country. So started in Boston, went up to New York, to Michigan, to Utah. Wow. So the way I structured it is, all the way up to Portland, Oregon, down through California, through Arizona, Texas, really just a full circle around the States. And the way I structured it to make it sustainable is, if you're working 9 to 5 and then after that, I work 6 hours for my startup that I'm currently working on. So if you're working, 12-hour days or so, the way to kind of be maintained is I made Sunday my travel day. So Sunday's the day I just drove. Sometimes Saturday was also a travel day because like Michigan to Utah, that was 24 hours of driving. So it's one of these things where, and it's not that expensive, right? I think I budgeted it out where I bought my job I was working for was paying for the trip. I did cheap Airbnbs. I stayed at friends' couches. I just did whatever I could to make it work. So happy to chat more about that. I love the trip. So much fun. And of course, if you're going to do that, you got to vlog it. So like I want to be like you. I want to be a content creator someday, you know, so I want to build the brand up.
Yeah, no, I really loved it. And I really found it, I think, speaks to just this notion that even the world is your oyster. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, here's a guy amidst the pandemic when everybody's freaking out. He's like, I'm gonna get in the car, take my job, but also just do this work. So I think I found it quite reviving. I was like, man, this is a good idea. I mean, why not?
Yeah, and I think the key thing is I was safe, right? I never got COVID. I was very careful in like who I interacted with, and you know, it was just myself. And it was a ton of time alone, right? I think that was the biggest part about it. It's just you got time to just sit with yourself and just talk to yourself for 12 hours in a car ride. No one's around you. Like, what else are you gonna do? So you just have this like this time to just kind of reflect and through the desert, through different parts of the country, and you see the little things. Like if you go on a plane from one side of the country to the other, you miss a lot. You miss the first cactus, right? That was the coolest thing to me. And like you see, like that was the first cactus I've seen on this trip, and then like instantly, like 20 miles later, thousands. But you kind of see the gradual progressions that you would never really understand unless you like went through it.
Yeah. Wow. This is really. I think it really also, from listening to your response, I think speaks truth to power. To oftentimes there's just so much noise going on. Right. Either we are consciously aware of it or subconsciously, we're not aware of what the rhetoric we allow to influence our decisions. So I think you speaking to the idea of just simply being alone, get to a point where you are comfortable with being with you.
Totally. That was beautiful. Yes.
Self-mastery. I think it's really, it looks like to me that it was more than just about living your best life, but also a sense of you really, allowing yourself to experience spaces, to be fully present, and you look back in hindsight, you're like, wow, for 3 months I lived, for 3 months, I wasn't just about getting this 9 to 5 done, but I also explored. I got to experience different ethnicities or different parts of the US. So I wonder how that must have felt, and it looks like you really enjoyed it quite well. I guess to start us off also, David, on the grand scheme of things, as we are reaching the latter part or the later days of the COVID virus, how, when you look back on it, how has COVID been for you? How has it been treating you, and how have you just navigated these times?
Yeah, I think I feel slightly guilty saying this in that that like I've been fortunate enough that no one in my close family's died or had anything that happened. So but me personally, in some really weird way, it's definitely benefited my work ethic. Yeah. Right. I think as someone who wants to, who's currently in the stage of my life that I want to be working 12 to 16-hour days. One of the biggest issues, especially as like a kid, or when I was in college, is this idea of like opportunity cost, right? It's like, when I'm working, what am I giving up? Am I giving up meaningful relationships I can be building? Am I giving up going out with friends? And through COVID, it's pretty much eliminated a lot of those possibilities anyways. So it's been a place for me to be like, great, I can just focus on work. So it's some really strange way, once again, in a guilty way, I think it's I've actually really benefited from that. So I think the one thing is, just knowing that other people I care about are going through a lot of stressful times is tough, but you have a chance to just kind of lock in and do whatever it is that you want to do for the day, and no one's going to stop you, right? Because it's the middle of a pandemic, right? There's so many larger issues you care about. Like, you can just lock in and go for it.
Yeah. And I guess, to really kind of shift gears now, in when I think about your body of work, when I think about the work that you've been involved to, I was really quite interested in really just starting the conversation from the origins of Skatify. right? I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. It's
Yes, you got it on point. On point. Yep.
At what point did you decide to start Skatify? What inspired it? What series of events propelled you to be like, this is one thing I want to start, and I see it impacting the lives of underprivileged children across the continent?
So I actually, this really started north of Boston, where I grew up.
Yeah.
I just love skateboarding, right? Yeah. I used to compete downhill skateboarding. So I'd do like more longboarding, if you will. I'd go to events, I'd set up tables, and I just started a little buy-sell trade. I just love getting boards in my hands. So we just tossed, we probably had hundreds of wheels and trucks and boards. I just like kind of flip, if you will, right? It's like classic, like Gary V's thing. It's like, you just flip things. Yeah. So that was my my hobby. It was the 7th grade through 8th grade. And then after I realized, like, not only did I start to know everyone in the Boston skateboard scene, but also over time, I realized that there's a lot of issues with existing boards. So I got some friends together, and some older high school kids I knew were in shop class. I convinced to help make the board. So make new boards. I was like, here, there's a lot of issues with existing boards. I think we should make a different board with different concave, with all these like kind of different specifications. So we started prototyping. Yeah. And eventually that grew into, we actually found a board we really wanted to mass produce. And then I found some manufacturers who could produce them. So we actually made a whole skateboard company. It was called Easy Boards. Yeah. We eventually had like 40 riders across like 7 countries. Yeah. I'd like send them out to different events to compete on our behalf. We're getting in different skateboard stores. We had a few full-time team members. So now come freshman, sophomore year, I had a little skate company. I had like a team. We were slowly growing the company out. And I think at that point I realized, it's great to like build boards. It's great to get more people skating. But one thing I realized that really bothered me is just how so many places just don't have skateboarding. And that was frustrating. So I started looking into a few different projects out there that existed that were a few different projects that were trying to get more people skating. One was Skatistan, focusing on getting young girls to skate. And then one of them was Ethiopia Skate and Make Life Skate Life. So these folks were just getting together and building parks, and they built or at least started building the first park in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And I reached out. I was like, this is the coolest project. It's like, they're like, this is the first skate park that's going to be here in the entire country. And for someone who has been deeply affected by skating in the most positive way possible, I think my whole life view is formed, and it was kind of stems from skateboarding. And the fact that other folks didn't have that, I was like, that's a bummer. Like, I would love to help out, right? So I ended up like sending boards. Ended up just like it was very very much led by them and like Make Life Skate Life in Ethiopia Skate. But I ended up like creating a little organization to really support groups like that were like local on the ground movements to build parks, to spread the word of skating. So it started off once again as just a little kid who's flipping boards, flipping wheels, trying to go to events, get as many boards as possible, making boards myself, building a team around that. And then once I had that, I was like, oh, you know what? Like other people should skate too. And then I realized, based on my own experience, like how important that could be, and that's what led to Skatify, and then working with different like local organizations to make the parks happen.
This episode is sponsored by our friends at the Leaders Journal. Are you a writer or perhaps looking for a premium self-help blog? Then you should click the link below to check out on insights about the work that they do and how you can contribute to the Leaders Journal. I believe that there's absolutely no way to build an empowering mindset without taking some time to actually reflect and think about how we can actively and practically execute on our purpose. And I think taking some time to read self-help articles is often one way in which I've found ways to figure out what other young people are doing and how I can actively change my perception and therefore the way I live. Therefore, I want to recommend a blog that I read once a week called The Leaders Journal, which is a platform that consists of concise and clearly laid out content that is palatable for anyone looking for practical ways in which they can improve
improve the outlook of their days as they unpack some of the core principles of mostly highly effective individuals across the globe. Make sure you don't miss out on this one, guys. Click the link below and check out the Leaders Journal. Enjoy the episode.
Which is definitely one thing I also found quite unique, David, when I looked into your work, and I think is a good intersection onto the next, thought, is that in your TED Talk, you also spoke about how skating allowed you to view the world. You described it as a ground zero perspective, right? And how it had taught you to kind of challenge prior assumptions, and I was really quite interested about, you spoke about, I don't know, you spoke about how it has been an integral component of your upbringing. And thus you had reached a point where you figured that this is the intersection of something I love, but I figured out there's also one way in which I could give back or impact the lives of those in my respective communities or those in underprivileged communities across the globe. So I think I'm quite interested, into that ground zero perspective. What does it look like? What does it mean? I know for sure one thing that also blew my mind is that the skate park that you co-built with this company in Ethiopia was one of its kind, was not a traditional type of a park. So I think quite interested, in this ground zero perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now I'll get into the park as well there.
Yeah.
So the key thing when you're a skateboarder is you look at objects around you.
Yeah.
And you play with them.
Yeah.
Right. You're a kid. And when I say that, I mean not play with it in the typical sense of like you play with a soccer ball. You play soccer with a soccer ball.
Yeah.
But you look at it like a curb or a wall or a cone in the street, and you see it as an obstacle to kind of make your own.
Yeah.
And shift into the way that you envision it being used. So you have this vision around what you're going to do with this cone or this road you're going to skate down, right? Or this like curb you're going to jump over, and you just kind of paint this picture, this vision of it, and then you do that thing, and the whole ethos, the whole experience of a skater is let me just play around with the world around me without any assumptions. And I think that's a key thing. It's like this minimizing any assumptions you have about how something is supposed to be used, and then going out there and actually using it in a way that you could imagine using it. And that's a very rare type of thinking. It's hard to replicate that in other places, because how often the skateboarding purpose of it is to like just interact with your world in a different way. You see stairs and you're like, maybe I could jump those, right? You think, right? Like, that's kind of crazy. Right? It's kind of great. It's good, but it's different. So hopefully that gives you a little more kind of background on what I mean there when it comes to like a ground zero.
And then I guess you kind of like view the world as you described it, I think in one article, you described it as viewing the world as your jungle, right? As this giant skate park where you could, like, what I would see as a normal human being who's not into skating, you see it entirely different lens. You see what you could do with that, and I'm guessing you're imagining what moves you're gonna make your board in that space. So I think it's quite interesting.
Thanks so much. I think it's the jungle gym, like the thing you play, you jump around on it, and everyone has that. But then for whatever reason, when they step into the real world, they kind of suppress their own jungle gym-esque type of thoughts. And that's how like cryptocurrency happens. And the reason I think that I want to bring that up is just like, cryptocurrency is this concept of like a new form of money. Like who decided like, whoa, like there could be different forms of money. Like what a crazy concept or whatever. Whenever there's innovation, I think it's because someone sees an industry as a jungle gym. And they realize they can tweak the parameters and make the reality they want to step into, and then step into that. Like they can create that reality and then step into it because they see what it could be, not what it is.
And it's interesting you talk about crypto, because it is something that I'm trying to learn. I'm kind of new to it. But one thing that that always struck me about crypto has been just the idea of finding a new way to store value, right? Which is
Yeah,
understanding practically what it actually is, right? That but we started with the gold standard, we use gold
totally.
as a measure of value. The barter trading system, if you look at the history of economics, and then wealth and money, and now using currencies and all, and now crypto tends to be one that kind of is a new component. So I think it's quite interesting, as you said, as to how you could view the world, an entire industry, when it comes to not only just the history of economics, but also how you value money, and think of a new idea that we can use as a store of wealth, such as crypto, blockchain. And this is all
Yeah,
entirely new to me, but yeah, that's my little of understanding of crypto. So it's quite
I
interesting to
think
mention it.
nail on the head, man. And the coolest thing about it is the fact that people believe it,
Yeah,
right? The fact that it's a story that everyone else can get behind, and
yeah.
people like that story, and then it's like a revolution in some way. It's
Mm.
like yeah, it's internet money. It's money that lives in the internet. It doesn't
Yeah.
live in a government, and that's just like a wait, what? Like it's a
Yeah.
crazy thing. It's like, because
Yeah.
you can prove if it's both digital and scarce, then you can create this new concept. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think I agree fully.
Yeah, which reminds me, I think a thought I had was that, sometimes our perception of the world is not necessarily what is actually occurring. That as individuals, either consciously or subconsciously, we've got certain voice or certain outlooks that influence the way in which we perceive, right? And
Right.
therefore, that then it kind of influence the way we interpret our realities, and therefore, you know what I'm saying, that has a huge effect on just our lived realities. Gets me thinking of also this quote that says that it is not the movement of a clock that produces the newness of life, it is the movement in your mind. So oftentimes, because of the rhetoric, because of the way we perceive the world, that as human beings, we are constantly sending out these energies and gravitating towards our thoughts. So I like the idea, going back to the idea of viewing the world as a jungle gym. The moment that lens, that you start to believe or start having such thoughts, the amount of infinite possibilities that you actually realize, right? Oftentimes we often think that a lot has been done, therefore very little can be done. But that perspective, adopting that, which I love about your work, and then just your thinking, the mindset, about viewing the world as a jungle gym. So talking about advancing your course, I know that you built a skateboard park that you spoke about in Ethiopia with that organization. Walk me through the process. After you've made these boards, you want to send them. How does it look like? Were there any impact stories, of how skateboarding has affected youth in that region, and what has been just the process with that project
Yeah.
with regards to Ethiopia?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. We're making rewind, probably 6-7 years ago now. And we got boards. I think I touched base with someone named Mike, or I forget exactly who it was. Someone at the foundation. And Adisu, I think, was someone else who was in Ethiopia Skate. I'm trying to remember exactly who it was, but we touched base. I believe I sent boards over initially, and then we got a bunch of local skate shops in Boston to donate boards. So we had a ton of boards, tons of decks, the whole setup. And then I decided that the best way to, the biggest thing was funds. That's what they needed most. So I was like, I'll host fundraisers. So so I actually ended up renting a yacht for a night. I got a bunch of sponsors and kind of local sponsors for the event. I think Coconut Water was one of the sponsors. We got a bunch of I reached out to a bunch of folks, and then I got a bunch of volunteers who were helping out. And we sold out tickets for $40 a night. It was like 300 people came. We sold out the event, so made enough there to help with shipping expenses and also help donate towards the park too. And then later on, we held a concert, and that concert was a similar scenario where we had around 500-600 people come through. We really just like did whatever we could to sell the tickets, so then to turn around there, right? So then we ended up using that money to one get the rest of boards and material that we needed to send over. I think we brought around 15-20 boards. It was more expensive to ship than it was to like get a ticket over there. So we ended up heading over there, bringing all the boards and gear with us for a week. As far as the park itself goes, it was already underway. It was already being worked on. So the park itself, this one's actually a concrete park. So the initial one in Ethiopia. And so we kind of get over there. It's my friend Ahmed and I, who's part of the project as well. And we get over there. We have all these boards. We go to the park, and it's probably a week long there. We went there every day during that week. Got to meet the folks who ran the park. Got to meet all the volunteers who helped build it. Wow, and then I'm just thinking back to it. I haven't thought about this in a while. And then we held a skate competition to like give out boards to kids, and we also helped establish a program there called the Loaner Program, where they could loan out boards to kids who were at the park and keep them safe there. But as far as moments that I realized how important skating was to quite a few of these kids, there was one kid there who was skating named Babu, and Babu was really good. He was fantastic. He was one of the most like talented skaters in the park. Jump, he clearly he's probably 11, 12 tops. And he did everything he did with sandals on. And I remember seeing this and being just so impressed with his not only his ability, but the fact that he was like, I'm gonna skate regardless of whatever I got on me, like I'm gonna skate. Right? And I talked to him about it, and no, it was clear that this wasn't a we made a small documentary actually around this, and one of the kids said that skating, it's not lifestyle, it's more of a life, it's larger part of his life than anything else. Going to the park, like the environment, the support around that was the biggest thing that for them, it was the support that they had from the other kids, the community that forms around this park, and that was probably the most magical part of it. But happy to get into kind of the insights that led to our understanding of how maybe better to make parks, and that we kind of gained there. But yeah, man, I mean, everyone there, it was clear that skateboarding was taken very seriously, in that it wasn't just a pastime, right? So many people think of it as like that's a fun little sport, but if it becomes a safe space, I think is what a lot of folks realize, and it became an incentive to get your work done, right? You go to the school the program after school, and maybe you finish your work before you start skating. There's all these different little things you can do with skating that it's hard to do otherwise.
And just I think listening to you, I think firstly, deeply inspired by your courage. You from Boston, you have this passion for skating, and you travel across the world to this community, and you are walking in with an idea that I simply just want to give back. I'm not here to have I don't have any underlying incentives, but I am committed to skating, and I really want to be in communities that value skating. You spoke about energies earlier on, but I really want to be in spaces that really value skating as much as I do. And as you said, view it as a lifestyle, which kind of, in your way speaks true to the fact that of the impact this can have in a kid's child growing up in an underprivileged community, on the continent. It's really interesting how small conversations or small interactions can really change the trajectory for many of these students. So I think thank you for doing that. I'm inspired as someone who's from South Africa, to often think about that it's okay that yes, we're in Boston, whatever, but at some point your life must become more than just about you. You know what I'm saying? That at some point, as you said, that it's important to take courage and go to expose yourself to a community you've never been in before, right? I'm guessing even the whole language barrier thing was probably a thing, but exposing yourself to that, and you know, as you said, just viewing the world as the jungle gym. I'm really inspired by that, David. Now, since building the park, what have been some of the building the park and coming back in the US, you know, and then continuing with the work that you're doing, what have been some of the challenges and successes or inflection points in your entrepreneurial journey thus far?
Yeah. So, and also quick clarification too. So we helped build the park. I don't take ownership over, you know, it's our park, right? I think it was a lot of work with these volunteers and helping with the funding side and all the programs and whatnot. But so after the park, you know, so one thing we noticed there initially was there's water that was seeping through the concrete, like the cracks of the concrete in the park. And the issue is like it's hard to get the irrigation right. So unless you have like professional park builders, it's really hard to get that right. So there's, you know, a lot of repairs that need to be done. And at that moment, that's when I really realized that, okay, you know, first and foremost is that maybe there's a better way to build parks. Maybe there's like an improved way to build parks or a way that's more scalable or sustainable. And that won't take, you know, because that's the other thing too. I saw the inside out of the process of how long it takes to build these things. It takes like, you know, 8 months plus, sometimes years to put these things together. You need hundreds of people there. It's a whole process. You have to get all the people in the neighborhood to agree with it. And so there's like, you know, so many components of it, you know. So what I'm getting at is that you know, building a park is very tough. It is a lot of moving parts. Sometimes you have to actually dig down 20 feet just to figure out like how strong is the soil that you can build on top of. And that's something that a lot of people just miss, right? There's, is it level? Like, what does it sit on? What is the nature of the land? Like, what is the environment there? Like, can it dry properly? So all these questions come into play. So one thought we had, I had probably, you know, around 4 years ago, about a year after this, and was really thinking about this and reflecting on the experiences. Maybe there's a way to actually make parks in a more scalable way. So we figured out maybe we'd take shipping containers and try to turn them into parks. So that was a big jump. And, you know, thinking about the whole jungle gym concept, the idea was, well, what if you could build the park and then ship it somewhere? So then you could just spin up a bunch of transportable parks.
Wow.
So that was the kind of thought process, like, you know, the next step of it. And it was really tough there for like the research and development of that. And that's what we recently, you know, finished up there is this idea of like, you know, we have this park, does it fold out? What are the mechanisms for folding it out? It was an engineering issue. You had to work with like different skateboarders to figure out like, what is the flow of the park? Like how do you build this thing in a way that is not only transportable and convenient and sustainable because it upcycles a bunch of steel or you know, these shipping containers, but also is really fun to skate and let's someone, you know, become a good skater on this park. You don't want this little, you know, it's like a cool concept, but how do you make the concept really like practical and just as effective as a typical park? So that was a lot of the challenges that we've had in the last couple of years. So a lot of it's been an engineering issue. And then the second big thing is like legality and trying to figure out where you would put this park. You know, it's like who's liable if someone gets hurt. Right. So there's so many complications and working with different governments to understand, like, you know, or even just understanding regulation around this. You know, even if you get the land donated to you, how do you have insurance for something that hasn't really been created before? Like, you know, it's a lot of risk there. So, and then of course funding, right? So there's so many, I mean, it's one of those things like running a company or doing anything where there's going to be tons and tons of barriers. And, you know, and to be frank, although we finished up a lot of the research and development side, the legal side is something we haven't been able to get over quite yet. But yeah, I'm confident that once I have a little more my own funding and a little more a little larger, more dedicated team, I think we can really start cranking these parks out and hopefully get skateboarding anywhere in the world. I think it's the real vision here is making sure that there's no place that you live where you can't skate. And that's really what it comes down to. So hopefully it gives you a good sense of some of the challenges and engineering and so many. There's so many. I can just keep going, rattling off the issues.
And then I think just off the challenges and off just your inflection points. I do know that you recently started a new enterprise called Intros AI, if I'm saying it correctly. So I think thinking about who you are as a human being and just your bodies of work with the Skatify and now shifting into Intros AI. So I think genuinely interested on what that means, what also inspired that next shift. And then I guess the last component would be, how does that kind of inflow or intersect with your future goals and aspirations for yourself, and what you see yourself doing?
Yeah, I think so if you were to ask me like a year ago, I have no idea like how these two are related. But it's one of those things where you kind of look back and connect the dots, right? I'm sure if I would ask, what led you to start this movement of your own, right? The Leaders Podcast and this community you're building. I think maybe you'd look back and you'd kind of like maybe draw lines, or you'd see the different patterns from the past. And I think the biggest thing is, the more I think about it, I think the more this is actually almost exactly the same in high level mission, in that one was the skate community and bring people together around skating and benefiting from each other. And Intros is making introductions in existing communities between members, so that we can build these closer ties between individuals of the same community. So I think it's a very, very similar concept. And I think the goal of Intros is to it's really, so we make the way it works is we make really meaningful introductions between people. And what we do is we go to community managers, so people who run a community. For example, if it was the Leaders Podcast, and let's say you wanted to have a community with all your past podcast guests.
Yes.
Folks who are kind of changers and movers, shakers and movers. I like how you said earlier. Exactly. And everyone wants to meet each other. The way it would work is you would customize the reason people get matched up. So maybe you'd say, okay, let's make the similar industry or interest in the world maybe worth 30% of a match. Let's make the location they're based as 20% of the introduction or of the match, and then maybe 50% is based on age or whatever it is. Yeah. So you could kind of customize the algorithm yourself of how people get matched. And then after that, we get text message introductions between each other roughly every week or so based on our preferences. So it's a way to build community and build these connections between folks of the same community. And that's what we started work on. But that's very similar to skateboarding. It's like, people go to this event, they go to this skate park, they build lifelong friends, they have this support network, and it has the same end output, is people connecting in meaningful ways around things that matter to them.
Yeah. Wow. And I guess talking about building communities and talking about, this idea of a kind of creating a sort of a family, or a community, what would you say, or what do you believe is your message to the world?
Yeah, I think, so the great thing about a community is it can be a little oasis, or it can be a little its own world in and of itself. And in that world, you can have your own rules, your own like parameters, right? You can kind of be that jungle gym. So if you look at a community as a jungle gym, and one that you build yourself, you can find your people. You can find your people and bring your people together around whatever that vision or mission is, because the fact that you have access to 7, or I don't know, at least 3 billion people or 2 billion people in the world, like who are on the internet. Like you have access to these folks who are in the weird kind of corners of the web that might share similar passions to you. So I think the biggest message is like, figure out what community you want to improve, or what community you want to be a part of, become an active member in that community. And then eventually you can create your own community based on your own values and based on how you want the world to be. So I think that's the key thing, is like, that was the whole idea of the Skatify, was like being immersed in the skateboard community. Now as someone I'm pretty much in the community space, I'd say I'm in the actual most meta community space of like, how do people create communities? And my biggest point is like, you can create a community and you can find your community to be a part of, and you have ownership to do that.
Yeah. Wow. Right. How can our listeners and our viewers stay in touch with the work that you're doing?
Biggest thing is hit me up on Twitter. I love chatting there. My handle is the brunch guy. At the brunch guy. So hit me up Twitter. Feel free to reach out anywhere, LinkedIn, email, or Instagram. But always down to chat. And if you're a skater, let me know. Love to chat with you as well. But thanks so much. Thanks so much. This has been incredible. This is so much fun. Really love the work you do. I love your podcast. I love your community. and I love that you're amplifying these voices. So thank you so much.
Yeah, right, guys. There you have it from David Kobrosky himself. Guys, go read and look about what he's all about on his social media pages. When his episode will be published, we will be sharing links to some of his website or some of his social media pages and his Twitter handles. And hopefully you can join him on a 3-month-long road trip the next time he does it. Once again, here at the Leaders Podcast, we believe that as more and more young people go conscious of their unique purposes, as they discover the hidden pearl, they essentially add value to society in the only way they can. Please remember to follow us on our YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify at the Leaders Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode and enjoyed listening to David's voice, please remember to like, comment, and share with at least 3 people who you believe will find this episode valuable. Until next time, be legendary.